I'll begin by taking the role of the other commissioners who are here for today's hearing. Commissioner Hom.
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
Commissioner Tuma.
Here.
A quorum is present. We have 3 items on our agenda today. Good morning, Mr. Eck. Please introduce item number 1 when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Sabin, Commissioners. Item number 1 is docket number IP-7109 /PPL-23-109 in the matter of the application of Magellan Pipeline Company, LP, for a route permit for the Pipestone Reroute Project in Pipestone County, Minnesota. The question before the Commission today is, should the Commission reconsider its October 22nd, 2024 order adopting Administrative Law Judge Report as modified, issuing route permit, and requiring cultural and archaeological survey? Staff would also like to note that alternative decision options were filed to e-dockets by Chair Sabin and Commissioner Tuma, and there are also print copies up on the front podium for folks if they're interested. And also the Commission received 2 late filed letters that were filed to e-dockets, one from the Braveheart Society and one from the Upper Sioux Communities Tribal Historic Preservation Office. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eck. I'd like to point out that online and in person, we have representatives from the Lower Sioux Indian community. It's my understanding that their council is all online. The Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe, Braveheart Society, and from Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Chairman Ryman LeBeau is in the audience. So we welcome your participation in the docket today. So, Commissioners, as Mr. Eck said, and I apologize, I also understand that Upper Sioux is also online and joining us. I can't see all of the folks who are on our screen. As Mr. Eck said, this is a reconsideration petition, and I'd like to begin with a couple of comments this morning. From my perspective, the Commission's decision to grant a permit for Route RA01 without full knowledge of potential harm to the cultural and archaeological resources and without full coordination with tribes wasn't reasonable, given the incredible importance of this area to tribal nations. A route permit for this project in this area should only be considered after the inventory and after tribal coordination is complete, especially given the short nature of the different route selections. Only then should the Commission make a decision on the route that is informed by the information from the inventory identifying potential impacts. So my proposed decision option, which was filed yesterday, rescinds the route permit, requires the applicant to conduct full cultural, archaeological, and historical inventories of all the routes under consideration, and requires coordination with an expanded list of tribal nations and tribally affiliated groups. Then it requires the applicant to make a compliance filing with this information on the inventories and coordinate before the Commission makes a decision on granting a route permit. My decision option is similar to the one that I offered in October, but and it requires Magellan to coordinate with MIAC on the selection of contractors who do the survey or the inventory work. Since Commissioner Sullivan and I voted on the losing side of the Commission's order, for this process to be undone and then for my motion to be enacted, Commissioner Hom or Commissioner Tuma would have to vote to reconsider our order, and then my accompanying motion would be in order. So with that brief explanation of where I'm at, I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner Tuma also filed a motion, but if you want to go first, Commissioner Tuma, go ahead, please.
I would. I mean, I don't want to trample, because I do have a lot of questions, because I do want to understand the functioning of your request, my understanding when we met last, that it wasn't able to be implemented the way it was laid out. That was just what was the testimony in front of us. So I want to explore that more. I think there was a lot of, from my perspective, not a full understanding of what full inventory meant and how an inventory should be played out in this scenario. I would hope that people who listened and paid attention to what I was saying and the decisions that we made understand that I am absolutely committed to no pipeline in the place of sacred items in this Pipestone area. Absolutely, totally committed to that. And I want to apologize to Miss Odegaard. I apparently must have put her in a bad spot, okay, because I was asking just questions to understand. And I think people perceived that my questions to understand what the place was, what the sacred place was putting her in a position where I was trying to pit her against other people. And that seems to be what I read between the lines in the letter. So Ms. Odegaard, absolute total apology. If anybody thinks otherwise, just blame me, and I think most people will understand. I was just trying to understand what the sacred place was so that we could avoid it. Madam Chair, you're asking for a different question. We have two other routes, okay? I don't know why you included RA2, because I would think even the applicant has moved past RA2, which was their alternative. We're really left with the question, as the ALJ so carefully and thoroughly laid out, was a decision between the further away, if you're going to move out of the place, and I think we made that choice to do that, you have the choice then between RA1 and RA3. And you're asking the question is, let's do a cultural survey of that. And full is what I want to understand. And so I don't know if Mr. Kirsch is here. I'm going to put him on the spot because I want to hear from the Department of Commerce's environmental and economic folks who actually do this on a regular basis, who are here to serve the public interest, and who are kind of eyes and ears in putting the permits together, so that I can better understand how these cultural surveys work within our permitting structure. Because the way I designed the permit, the motion that I put forward that designed the permit and our staff put together, was that there was going to be some in-depth cultural surveys done on RA3 only, but I want to understand how it possibly could work if we were to do some archaeological work now on just 3 and 1. We can still do 2 if we want, but I don't see the purpose of it. So let me ask you a few questions, Mr. Kirsch. I think you have to state your name for the record. Might as well get that done before we trip you up.
Mr. Kirsch, welcome. Please state your name and the party you're representing.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ray Kirsch. I'm with the Minnesota Department of Commerce Energy Environmental Review and Analysis Unit.
So in the motion that Commissioner Seaman has put forward, she talks about a full cultural, archaeological, and historical resources inventory, something we were going to do in the permit anyways, but I want to understand how that works. And this is what I was able, poking through the record and trying to figure out how this all works, but I want to confirm it and understand it better so we can make a good decision today. Is that there are kind of 3 phases to that approach. Phase 1 is more of, let's look at the lay of the land, kind of a survey of known information that we have. And from there, and you define the area of potential effect. I think they call it an APE, which they're worse at acronyms than we are. But so they define that, and then they try to identify areas that need additional surveys, more than just a visual look over the records. That's kind of phase 1. We set the scope, we would call it a scoping kind of decision of what needs to be done and what we know that's in that area. And then there's a phase 2 where they say, okay, now I have some areas that are potentially significant. Houses over 50 years old, things like that they look at, and they have to inventory, and that requires them to kind of actually start poking around a little bit And then whether they poke around on the land a little bit, they may find something that needs mitigation that requires some additional work. That's phase 3 is the mitigation. That's what I was able to glean from the record. So help me out. Is that how it works? You know, feedback to me so I can understand what that full thing looks like and how it functions.
Commissioner Tuma, your recounting is consistent with my understanding as well. We have many projects, not just this project, where the archaeologists at the State Historic Preservation Office, our Tribal Historic Preservation Office, recommends a Phase 1 survey, which is, as you noted, walking the ground. You can also use modeling for the landscape, and there are certain resources, particularly water resources, are the things that might indicate this was an area that had been used previously. And then if there are those areas, proceeding to phase 2, which might be shovel test, or looking in certain areas, digging up certain portions of the ground, seeing what you find. And if you do find things, going to phase 3, which might be more in-depth removal of certain areas to investigate what actually is there. So the way you recounted it is consistent with my understanding.
Ms. Brusman, you might as well come up because, and I want to make sure I recount what you said to us at the last hearing was that in doing the full survey, at some point, you're going to have to poke around on people's property. And so, and that's what could make doing a full survey impossible without a route designation. And my understanding would be is that you're saying to us, look, unless I have eminent domain authority and I can force somebody to give me access to their land, I have to ask permission, and they could say no, which would then deny me the right to be able to do a full survey. I think that's what you're saying to me. So, but I want to make sure, because I was hearing phase 1 possibly could be done without necessarily going on the land, but it could require it. Definitely phase 2 and phase 3, we have to be on people's property to do it. Is that what you're trying to say to us?
Ms. Brusman, please state your name and the organization you're representing today.
Good morning, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Christy Brusman, appearing on behalf of Magellan Pipeline Company. Chair Sieben and Commissioner Tuma, to answer your question, yes, for a full survey, as Mr. Kirsch laid out, there are several stages. We have done the desktop work, and EERA did the desktop work as part of their environmental review for all of the routes under consideration. But when we're looking to get to field survey, both the order and our practice would be that we want to make sure that we're surveying not only the right-of-way, right, and in this case we're looking at the route width, both sides of the road, because we're still in the process of acquiring the easements from the individual landowners along RA01. And then in addition to that, the temporary workspace and the laydown yards and all of the areas that come with an engineered route. But most importantly, in order for folks to be on the ground, we do need landowner permission, especially if we're including third parties in our survey efforts. And so to have a full survey, to have the most complete information to return to the commission with, again, prior to construction, having a route permit allows us to do that full survey for all of the areas that will be affected by construction.
I asked our folks to look at the law, and it's best my understanding, just designating a route as a potential survey does not give anybody authority to force themselves on people's land. And actually, we see something in South Dakota happening with your Summit client who has had that same problem. When they try to get to land, they almost have to do quick take eminent domain to actually get to some of these people who just object, say, we don't want to go on your land. We don't create any authority for you or even Mr. Kirsch to go on people's land, okay, by just designated as a potential route. I couldn't find anything in the statute, and I don't know if you know of anything.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Tuma, I would agree with your analysis. The eminent domain comes from a route permit as the statute is laid out, and so we would need a designated route from the commission in order to make sure we have full access to the entirety of the route in which we plan to construct.
Mr. Kirsch, is that your understanding? I mean, you have to ask people's permission to go look at their land if your folks are out there. That's the way you look at it, right?
Commissioner Tuma, I can't offer a legal opinion, but that is my understanding as well.
And so I'm looking at this, trying to understand kind of where we can go to make this work. Under our permit that we drafted, okay, there's going to be some consultation, but my understanding is I think we expected, at least my expectation was, that you were going to consult with the tribes who this actual consultant who would do this work, this full survey. And so is that what was your understanding, Ms. Brusman, that when we sent the permit as we did it now, you were supposed to be working with them? Obviously, it's not been going very well. We won't be sitting here today, but that was my expectation. Did I miss something?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Tuma, I think there are a couple of different components to it. So as you walked through with Mr. Kirsch, there are several parts of this survey. The, architectural you mentioned, which is looking at older buildings.
You need to speak up a little bit. Sorry, the microphone isn't picking you up.
She's turning the microphone up. My apologies.
So I mentioned there's architectural, looking at the buildings. There's the traditional archaeological surveys, which are, again, following SHPO and other state standards. And then, importantly in this case, there are the cultural surveys. And those are typically conducted by representatives from either TIPO offices or tribal members who have been trained to look for and specifically identify those traditional tribal cultural resources.
But is it like when we do? I'm familiar with this because my daughter does the environmental surveys, and so you hire West Consulting. They go out and they give you a lay of the land, okay, tell you what the concerns are. Then you come and you put in your permit, this are the concerns that we have. And then after you lay that out, we say to you, you need to now do an actual survey after you've been operating for a year, that kind of thing. And so there's a consultant that you're hired. This consultant, West Consulting is, so, and you hire them. They're mostly going to do the work from beginning to end. They're going to do the initial evaluation of a site. They're going to be with you as you do the application, working with the DNR, and then more than likely they're going to do the actual physical, going out there counting the dead birds, okay, or doing the plots. So help me out. Is there people like that in this environment? I don't know. Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, there are. And what we would say is that we would work in partnership with the archaeological survey consulting firm, which again is looking for your traditional cultural surveys, along with our partnership with the tribal cultural specialists, who would be looking for the tribal cultural surveys, resources, and they work together. So they'll go out to the field together. Some cases, there are sensitive resources where the tribal surveyors may return to a site.
And I appreciate, but that's not my question. My question is, are you going to consult with the tribal community on the selection of West Archaeological, okay, or whoever it is, so that they can feel comfortable with the person who's actually doing the work out there?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Tuma, we certainly have been and will continue to do that.
I mean, I think to me that was my understanding of the process was going to be, is you were going to work with them to hire somebody. Some of this work has already been done, what you call the desktop work. Will that be reviewed by the person that you have selected, and will they essentially do it over, which is fine because they want to make sure they're not missing anything when they try to find those areas of significant impact?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Tuma, yes, and when you look at the RA01, we're gathering additional area here to make sure that we've got all those temporary workspaces and all of those areas covered, both by our desktop review, which will be looked at by the field survey crew. It's very important to their work, so they kind of know where to focus and what to look at. And then the field survey will be done, again, in partnership with the consultant and with tribal representatives. And we have been meeting monthly with tribal representatives to both gain interest and to help identify that survey scope, and who are available and qualified surveyors who can come out and do that work. And we're very pleased to have some folks who have already indicated interest in doing that, and we're going to continue those efforts to make sure that we have as broad a participation as possible in this effort, because we know it's very important.
And you don't have any problem. Commissioner Sieben and I put together lists of folks that we perceive that asked now, after the fact, to be part of that discussion. You have no problem adding those folks to that discussion?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, we don't. We started with a group of 29 tribes, focused both on those located in Minnesota and the 23 with traditional ties to the Pipestone National Monument. And we're going to be happy to continue that broad participation with as broad a group as both you direct and as would be appropriate for this important site.
And as of now, though, for just I should ask you this question first. I'm assuming there's really no need for us to look at RA2 anymore. This is a question between 3 and 1 at this stage. Is that your understanding? If we would go back to redo this, I mean, why would we look at 2?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, we're focused on RA01. Again, we think that between 1 and 3, 1 is still far superior based on the record.
Right, yeah,
but
I get
I
that.
agree. We have moved on to a focus on RA01.
That's what I want to be clear. As far as how the process works, I want to truth test this. So I'm hearing from the applicant, but I want to hear from you, Mr. Kirsch. Anything that she has said as far as the process that you've seen so far and what you expect so far, any different?
Commissioner Tuma, no.
Now, here's the tougher one, and I'm open to this discussion, but I want to hear the applicant's position on this. I mean, when I look at what Commissioner Sieben has recommended, Chair Sieben has recommended, essentially it's coming back and doing a little bit thorough environmental assessment piece on this one specific area, okay? And having us look at what you can do, because my guess is that you can't do a full one if we don't give you a route. Okay, I've got that in my head. But you could do some things as of now. So eventually what I see happening here is you could do a more thorough and targeted, working with the tribes, phase 1 approach of the inventory and come back to us, and then we can make a decision between 3 and 1 based on whatever information that you can glean, that you either get permission from the landowners or that you can glean from the record or just the observations that you have. And so essentially we're coming back here not only to look more closely at 1 and 3, we're then coming back later with the full one once you finish it, once we've made that selection. It seems like we're coming back, if we do what she's recommending, coming back and making a final decision between 3 and 1, and then we have to do the full one then can be completed after we make the decision whether 3 and 1, after we balance all the factors. That's kind of what I see happening here. So my question to you, what would we get if we sent you back and did this with regards to as much as you can do within the full, what would we get?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Tuma, I think if we rescind the permit and do as much as we can, we will come back to you with incomplete information on 1 and 3. If the order stands, we would have the most complete information on 1. And again, you still get to make a decision as to whether there are any important cultural resources that haven't been avoided before we can start construction. You've already built that into your underlying order. So I think
if we would come back on 1 and we would find that unbeknownst to us, there was a significant tribal village running from the monument going 5 miles to the west along the Pipestone Creek, okay? And the full analysis at that stage, which will go through phase 3 about mitigation, and the person that you've worked with that's selected by the tribes comes back and says, there ain't no way around it, okay? You can't, it's impossible. There's just too much between the monument and 5 miles downstream that you just can't get around it. Your options at that stage would be essentially coming back to us and asking for RA3 and having to essentially start over and do RA3 would be my guess. Or we could send you back and say, we can't mitigate this. You got to go find a different route even further away. That would be my thinking, your 2 options, if that exists.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, I'd agree that we'd be starting over. Whether 3 is included in that or not, it would be an evaluation based on whatever was found to make sure that we're avoiding those resources.
And if you find something maybe along the roadway that's more than rusted barbed wire and old pop bottles, that is of significance, okay, you would have to come to us and work through phase 3, okay, to figure out with that consultant that has been helped and selected with the benefit of the tribal communities, okay, and figure out a different alternative route that may avoid it, even though if it's just in that zone, you might move it over 100 feet, You might go down a different county road. That might make more sense, a little further out, something along those lines is what you would be doing.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, that's correct. And as I understand your order today, if the survey finds such a resource in the report, the mitigation has to be also included in that report and coordinated with the tribes. So we'd be bringing that full package back to you if there needs to be a change, or if we've identified a resource that can be mitigated by a slight change in the alignment or something like that. That would be coming back to you in the full package again before we can start construction.
So, Mr. Kirsch, if we were to do something along the lines of at least a phase one, or sending you all back to just do an analysis, closer analysis of 1 and 3, do you perceive there would be any additional new information that would be provided? Or, I mean, it seems like there's some work that has been done, but it's probably not as complete. We could get something back from you if we were to send you back and do a deeper dive into the cultural and archaeological stuff along 3 and 1?
Commissioner Tuma, first of all, the way I read the order, it's the applicant and their consultants who would be doing it and coming back to you. But
You're
I mean,
observing it, and you're watching it. Your eyes.
no, we are definitely involved in the permit compliance portion of the commission's permit. Yeah, I think it is hard to know. I think you will get some information back on 1 and 3. I think Ms. Brusbin, she termed it incomplete. It's really hard to know how landowners feel about it, and the surveys and the ability to gather information without the route permit is very difficult for me to speculate on that. You would get additional information, certainly. We're doing desktop analysis because it's the best information we can gather in the time period that we have to do the environmental review and permitting process. You definitely will glean more by being on the ground and walking those very specific areas.
And, I'm looking at this. I mean, I'm thinking, if we're to be careful and we want to create appropriate expectations, because I don't think appropriate expectations are being understood. I mean, if we've had that many people objecting to our order and not feeling that they've been heard, obviously I wanted them to be heard, and apparently they weren't heard the way they should have been. There might be some benefit to taking a step back and taking a closer look at 1 and 3. And it might give us information, and I've always been of the world that any commissioner who wants more good information on a route should have that. Any guess at how long, that would take us to just get that kind of initial look before kind of you hit the wall?
Commissioner Tuma, I think Ms. Bruson's probably in a better spot to answer that question.
Ms. Brusman, any idea if we were to send you back, how long would it take before you kind of hit the wall and you need to get landowner permission and we have to make a decision? We have to do something, because I agree with your analysis that you went to an ALJ, a very good ALJ, and proved that you have a viable route and you met all the permit conditions, okay, the statutory conditions to get a permit. He's told us there are 4 viable routes. We've limited it now down to basically 2. So if anybody's here thinking no is going to be an answer here today, that's not going to be it. It's where and when. And so my question to you is the when. How long would it take if we sent you back before you hit the wall, and you'd have to come back to us and say, okay, here's the information we have on 1 and 3. You need to make a decision so we can move ahead. How long would that take you?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, under the current permit, and I think that's the same process we would follow if we were doing 1 and 3, our current plan is to get the survey permissions to get out there to do the survey in the spring. We can't do this field survey until the snow is off the ground and conditions are appropriate for survey. So it would be surveying in the spring. Then there's the consultation process in which we would share the results and finalize the report. And then once that is finalized, it comes back to you. So we're currently thinking that will be late summer, early fall, to make sure we have appropriate time for a careful field survey and consideration. I don't know what our success rate would be on 3 or 1 if we don't have a route permit, but that would be the time frame in which we would return information to you using the best practices that we have.
Yeah, and I'm fine, Madam Chair. I mean, I'm just trying to understand this. I went into this open-minded, trying to figure out, can we make your suggestion work, and I think we could, but I also want to be straightforward and honest with people. We may not be able to get a full, and I think people are thinking that somehow we can get a full without a route permit, but we can get a lot of some information, I don't know what. And so I'm open to that. I don't know where Commissioner Hom is. I would be open to your suggested motion, but I would probably have a few minor adjustments so that we're creating appropriate expectations. I am personally comfortable where the order is at, but I'm also open to, if other commissioners need more information, I am one who is always open to more information. And so I'm not saying we need to be deliberating right now, but I'm just telling you where my mindset is at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I think I spoke on the day of the last meeting that my intention is trying to help to expedite or have a more better information by designating the routes. However, many tribal members spoke otherwise. I think I have seen enough information in the record after we issued the order. So I am planning to move a motion to reconsider. Being said, I think, once again, we are not deliberating, but as I think Commissioner Tuma asked applicants and the department, I understand there is some shortcoming, but this is not about efficiency only. My concern is we need to build the trust and relationship with the tribal nations. And when they spoke in unison voice, we have to pay additional attention beyond our typical environmental review and route permit process. I think I missed that portion last time. And last time I focused too much on, this is, I think, better for you, but they spoke otherwise. So I think now I have to consider that seriously here. I cannot judge which one is better for the tribal nations. I have to listen what they think, what's best for them. I understand this is a route permit, so it's not easy to deny route. It is process to find the best route. So once again, it can be a longer process than initially we thought, but hopefully we can find a better path so tribal nations can understand and agree with the best route. So that's my thinking at this point.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't have any more questions. I would need a little more time with staff given the information that I've just now gleaned, and so I want to make sure I'm accurate with how I describe how we move forward. But I don't want to trip up anybody having additional questions. So.
Yeah, Commissioner Sullivan, did you have something to add? And we can take a break then after.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I stand where I was sitting the last go around. I still think I'm in support of your decision option that would require the additional analysis for the other routes. That's where I was the last time. That's where I am today. I am obviously, I don't think that, I appreciate what Commissioner Hom said, that the tribal communities obviously don't feel like the current route is, that it gives them agency, that they feel like they've been heard, that they've been a part of the process. And I guess the only thing I would say to the applicant is that I think it's really important that on these matters that involve, really sacred sites, that you are working with the parties early and often. And I mean, but I said all that before, and I feel exactly the same way. So that's where I'm at.
And Commissioner Tuma, just to respond to some of your earlier line of questioning with the applicant, my decision option was pretty much, like I said earlier, the same one that that I had done earlier, and that was based off of the record then where tribes were asking for the definition of a full cultural, archaeological, and historical resource inventory for the routes that were in the record. So if I know that the applicant said that they were fine dropping the route, is it 2 that's closest to the monument? Before we do that, I just want to check in with some of the tribal members if they don't see 2 as a viable alternative, then I'm happy to remove it from my decision option. But when I made the motion, again, it was trying to not question your intentions or your the previous order that the commission issued, but it was again trying to say, like, first we should look at the cultural and the archaeological impacts of the different routes that are in the record, and then we should make a decision. And that's what this does, what my motion similarly does. So I don't know if that helps a little bit more. The other thing that it does is it says that that Magellan shall select the person who does, or the contractors who do the surveys in consultation or in coordination with MIAC, and or at least I think it intended to. I'm not sure if I filed the right version here, but that's something that we want to put in the reconsideration motion as well, or I would be supportive of, because I think we've heard that from Ms. Brusvin that they are working now with the 32 or the different tribal entities that are in the record, but I didn't see that in preparation for the meeting today, that coordination had occurred or was happening. So it says here, the applicant shall coordinate with MIAC to select a contractor or contractors with appropriate knowledge to perform the work associated with the inventories. Ms. Brusvin, I'll start with you. Are you opposed to that particular line of my motion, that you would coordinate with MIAC to select the contractors who are going to do these surveys, or yes or no?
Madam Chair, can I ask one question? I don't know what process MIAC would use for that, if there's a public meeting process, or could we do you have any information that would help us in terms of how we would approach them with that request, and what timing you think that would be appropriate? We're happy to coordinate with them. I'm just not familiar with how they would interact as a body with us to select a contractor, and I just want to make sure that I have some information on that. We're not opposed to coordinating with them. I've just not done it before, and I want to have some understanding into how you think that would work.
I think it would work essentially that what my understanding is that you're selecting a contractor who has the knowledge of the site, the importance of the site, probably lives nearby, rather than, bringing in someone from a different part of the country who may not have the specific, like, cultural knowledge of the tribes in the region. That was, and MIAC for, well, you know what MIAC is. So I think it is trying to reflect that there's significant tribal interest from Minnesota tribes and others from the region, and it would be helpful if you selected a contractor that everyone is comfortable with, so that later when we come back and see what the results of the surveys are and the inventories, that there's not a dispute about whether the person that was selected was that the tribes were objecting to the selection of your contractor. So that is about the further definition of what that is. It says, coordination kind of intentionally so that it's a little bit mushy, but you're talking to MIAC and making sure that they're comfortable I don't think there's a, I don't know if there's a representative from MIAC on the person here. Oh, there is. If you want to come forward, sir, and introduce yourself and see if this is something you can let us know whether you're comfortable working with the selection of Magellan or with the contractor that they have selected. If you've welcome, and please state your name for the record. There's a little button on the bottom of the mic there.
Hello. Isaac Weston, Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, Tribal Cultural Specialist. Tribal Cultural Manager, sorry. Cultural Resource Manager. Very sorry. Okay. Yeah, we can coordinate with you. I can pass my information along to you.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anything else that we should cover in my, and then also, Ms. Brusvin, at the end, this is similar to the decision option language that I offered in the fall. You're willing to, after the survey results are done, you're willing to provide comments or to do a compliance filing that shows the coordination and the discussions you've had with the entities listed here, and we should likely include MIAC in that as well. Once the surveys are done, you know, what comments folks have on the surveys.
Madam Chair, yes, we'll be happy to summarize that, noting again some of the information we may not have full access to, but what is available to us in public, we will provide.
And then because there are so many tribal entities on, I'll try doing it this way, and we can see if this works. But, you know, as Commissioner Tuma noted, my decision option includes a survey of RA2, which is the route that is just north of the applicant's preferred route, north, and then it runs south. But it's closer than RA1 and RA3 to the sacred space. And is there any tribal representative that wants to speak that wants RA2 to still be considered as a route that they think that the commission should consider? And Mr. Weston, I know this is putting, no, you don't want to speak on it. Okay.
Wise choice.
But does anyone not want us to look at RA2 and do a full cultural and archaeological survey? Ma'am, if you want to come forward, please, we'd welcome to hear your thoughts. You can sit right there if you'd like, and there's a button. Mr. Kirsch will help you to make sure it's on. If you could please state your name and the organization you're representing. And it's a little unusual for me to just ask anyone to raise their hand. So if you could try to keep your comments to whether you think the commission should include a cultural survey of RA2 or not, I would appreciate it.
Bonjour, Dinaway Maganog, Bangi et Goni ni Tao Jibwayam, Wanikwe Nijan Dijnakaj, Nagachi Winong and Dunjaba, Deborah Topping from Fond du Lac. I do not believe that RA2 would be adequate. It's too close to the monument.
So you agree with us then? We shouldn't do a
Yes,
survey.
you should not have, you should just get rid of RA2.
And that's what she asked, yes.
Yes. Preferably, yeah, and not even RA3. It's still north. It's still in the watershed. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Or
Appreciate
I'm
that.
sorry, I'm sorry, RA1. That's what I meant. As it is north of the monument.
And then we'll take a break, and I'll just remind folks that a copy of my decision option that shows it was filed in the record, but that's what we've just been discussing, is in the front of the room here. Commissioner Tuma, how much do you think 15 minutes is good? Or
15 minutes should be plenty, yeah, thanks.
okay. Before we break, Ms. Brusvin.
Madam Chair, could I just ask you to consider one additional modification of this as you think about it? It would be, I think, helpful to the applicant. We had asked if the commission has a great tribal liaison. If your tribal liaison could be an active part of our coordination, I think would be really helpful. He's got great contacts, keeps things up to date. It would be really helpful if he could be authorized to be a part of the coordination. Again, doesn't have to lead the meetings, but it would be helpful to have his presence.
No, I
and
appreciate
context.
that, Ms. Brusvin. The challenge is, as you know, or hopefully everyone knows, the commission has had a tribal consultation policy since 2019. The state legislature and Governor Walz signed that into law this last spring that formalizes that tribal consultation policy. But because we have ex parte restrictions and we're a quasi-judicial regulatory body on specific dockets, it is sometimes difficult because of the constraints of our process for our tribal liaison to be involved in all of those meetings. But we'll consult with staff and see if there's something we could put in the motion that would, as long as we're notifying people, maybe it will work, or I'm not sure. But
Madam Chair, we have no objection to filing a report after those meetings. We're looking for broad participation and sharing of information. So if the result is a report following those meetings, that's not a concern to us. We just welcome his participation as a resource in the process.
yeah, no, and part of the back part of this, you will be hopefully filing all the results of the inventories into the record so everyone sees the results of the surveys and the inventories as well on the two routes. So, okay, thank you for that. We'll stand in recess until 11:15. The commission will come back from its recess, and Commissioner Tuma, it seems you've passed out a modification of my decision option that is at our desk. So why don't you, I'm not
I'll walk you through it.
sure I'm going to agree to this, but you can walk us through it.
I think you'll agree to it, Madam Chair. So let's walk you through it. So at the first paragraph, you'll note all my suggested changes are in red. And so there was some discussion, and it wasn't clear to us in your motion about the selection of an appropriate consultant. I might even.
It's the first line after the bullets.
So the first red part. So we added in making sure that it's clear that the consultation that is occurring with this sentence, it's a long sentence, but it includes all these entities that were all the parties who have indicated they wanted to be consulted, so we're just going off the record. And so we wanted to make it eminently clear that this included the selection of the consultant. That wasn't very clear in the motion, so we just wanted to clarify selection of the consultant and completion and complete, and then here's where it's somewhat different, as practical, it can be achieved with voluntary access to property along the route, at a minimum, phase one of the full cultural survey. Phase one includes a full, thorough walkthrough of the property, so they may not even be able to walk some of it. It's all the process before people who are knowledgeable in this area, who are, excellent consultants that'll be worked with the tribes. They'll walk it, and they'll look at it, and they'll identify areas of concern. Phase two is where you actually start digging up people's property. And so, and phase three is, again, mitigation. So we want, at a minimum, when it comes back to us for the final determination between RA1 and RA3, we want at least a minimum of phase one to be done. I would say.
Can we, sorry to interrupt Commissioner Tuma, but can we put the modified language on the screen?
Oh, sorry.
Ms. Fazio, I should have thought of that.
Yeah, I should have thought of that too.
So the new language you're suggesting is in red
Is
and
in red.
underlined.
And so at a minimum, we want to see the phase one done, but that's at a minimum. If the applicant can make progress and get all the way through all the phases by the completion of this compliance filing, all the power to them. So we just want to have something to be able to work from when we make the routing decision. I remove RA2. And then at the bottom, basically just technical changes to make that paragraph above work. So it's phase one of the inventory, it's RA1 and RA3. All phases will include development with these entities, the TIPOs from the state, the TIPOs and from the Historical Preservation Office and the state archaeologists. So I just want to make clear, not just phase one, but all phases. It is understood, and this is a preamble so that everybody is informed about our understanding. It's understood that the applicant may not be able to get permission to access all the properties to complete phase one according to the standards, and the consultants will clearly identify additional phase one work that would need to be resolved after the route selection and land access being obtained. And so the goal is to get phase one done with voluntary, but if for some reason there's some work that the consultant that everybody is comfortable with thinks there's more phase one work done, we expect that to be explained to us in the compliance filing. The next paragraph, I think, is very important. I think it was a wise decision to include it, Madam Chair. After completion of the phase one inventory, the applicant shall send the results to the tribal nations. So this is going to be multiple consultations with them. And the entities listed, about what has been done and occur no later than 30 days after completion of the inventory. The applicants shall also confer with SHPO and TIPO representatives about the results of phase one. And so if there any reason in the phase one thing that any tribal entity don't think they've done a good job, they can go look at the areas of concern and communicate what concerns they have to the consultant, so that it's not the consultant is just not finishing their report and handing it in, and that's the first chance that the tribes get to look at it. 30 days before that, they're going to get a chance to look at it and make some educated observations if they feel that's necessary. The applicant can complete the filing of the Phase 1 results of the portion of the inventory will be done, and I think the last part was not unfortunately put in red, my apologies. In Phase 1, a portion of the inventories. So again, just conforming to the way we're doing the Phase 1. And then this is another important thing. After the receipt of the compliance filing, this compliance filing for us to establish what is the appropriate route to be permitted, the applicant is still subject to conditions 9.1, and that is the requirement that after we designate a route, okay, they need to come back to us and show us what their final cultural survey full inventory is once the full inventory is completed. And so they'll come back to us twice now, one for a route selection between 1 and 3, and they will come back to us still, as we anticipated in our initial permit that we approved, the 9.1 language, which is after the full inventory is done, they have to come back to us to make sure we are not getting anywhere near that specific area of cultural and spiritual significance for the tribal nations.
I guess, Commissioner Tuma, people online can't hear. So I don't know, Ms. Swoboda, if and I can't see anybody online, but if anyone is online and can hear us, can you let us know?
We can hear you.
And you have been able to hear? Or, I mean, you've heard Commissioner Tuma, his comments, Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the last thing I have, Madam Chair, I did not, as requested by the applicant, I did not add in our tribal liaison. He does have authority to participate in these meetings, and I think he has plenty of authority to continue to participate as is appropriate. And I think you certainly, Ms. Brusman, know where he's at and can communicate with him. And if there is a need for him to intercede within the provisions of our ex parte requirements, he'll make it happen. I just didn't want to state that in any motion or an order. But I don't want to say that we've ignored that request. We've talked, and he's more than happy to continue to participate and help as he has been through the process.
Okay, before we move forward with this, one on that last point too is, I think what I would be supportive is we request the participation of the Department of Commerce in the way that they feel is appropriate, rather than having our tribal liaison directly involved. And that is another option for us to consider. Commissioner Tuma, I'm a little concerned that the insertion of the definition of Phase 1, are you proposing in your modifications that Phase 1 inventories happen on both routes, and then is there any difference between RAO1 and RAO3 in terms of having access to be able to complete them as much as possible? It just,
There's absolutely no difference between
to
how we
my
treat
ear,
one.
it seems a little bit like we're adding in additional language here that may not be necessary in terms of like if the applicant can complete a further Phase 2 inventory, for example, that might be better, and I think is indicative of what the tribes had requested in their initial language when they offered this language. But
Madam Chair, none of my language is absolutely not needed at all, but the reality is, what I'm trying to do is to make sure we set appropriate expectations going forward with what can be done and what will be done. We could have done your motion just as it is, but what would have happened is it would have came back to us with, we can't do Phase 2, I mean, that's, and
Well, Commissioner Tuma, I am not trying to argue with you because I appreciate that you're willing to work with me on the reconsideration. But again, like the point here is we should get as much information as possible on the two routes and then make a decision.
And that's what this motion says, Madam Chair. I'll read it to you again. Okay. It says, select an appropriate consultant and complete as practical it can be achieved with voluntary access to property along the routes, a minimum of phase one, at a minimum of phase one of the full cultural and agriculture study. We're going to get as much as we can, but I want everybody to understand a lot of the phase two stuff may not be able to be done until we actually can get permission. If I was a landowner,
that's
I don't
the
want
way-
anybody digging in my land unless I have to. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. Set the right expectations for what's going to happen.
I'm wondering if, I know that the leadership of the Lower Sioux is online, and I can't see if they're online. But is there a council representative online that wants to comment on the decision option? If so, you could turn on your camera, and then I'll be able to see you. Maybe not.
Madam Chair,
Just a second.
Madam Chair, in the back.
Oh. Oh, okay, sir, he just said he's with Lower Sioux. I know that Lower Sioux is online on the WebEx, and, but if you want to comment, or the folks online from the council wanted to comment on this, I'd welcome that. Yeah, people in the back can't hear you, but what the gentleman said is that if the council wants to comment, they can turn their mic on, but I don't see that happening. But if they're not turning their mic on, did you want to, oh, there we go.
Lower Sioux, this is Lower Sioux Council. We don't have a comment, but we do have Cheyenne and a couple others on representing us too.
Ms. St. John, welcome. If you wanted to add any comments, I'd appreciate it.
Just a question that comes to mind right away is in terms of the revisions that are being proposed, I think the previous commissioner had mentioned access to some of the private areas. So in the event that survey was not allowed or we weren't granted access to that, how is that going to affect the process moving forward? I know that neither the tribe or the PUC has the authority to make all of these areas accessible for survey. So just kind of looking at it from that perspective of, challenges into the future and how and making sure we're understanding the feasibility of what's being proposed here.
Madam Chair and Ms. St. John's, thank you for the question, if it's okay. This is my understanding, is that when we get to the conclusion of this next phase of the permitting process, there is no route, and we will make a judgment based on what information we have. If we feel that we need to do more scoping, we certainly can go back and scope for more information that may be missing, that any cultural survey that the tribes feel doesn't fully cover after you select or work with selecting the consultant. If you feel they're missing something, that will all come out in what I would call the next proceeding, where there is no route. We have to select it based on the facts and the evidence in front of us. If we feel there's not sufficient evidence, and you feel we don't have sufficient evidence to make an appropriate determination between RA1 and RA3, we have a chance at that stage to look at the department and say, do some more scoping. We have whatever information you think we need to go get, we can go get. But that's the judgment we will make at this next phase of the permit. Do we have enough information to make a selection between these two particular routes? in avoiding it. So my assumption is that will be addressed in the compliance filing and your responses to the compliance filing. Ms. Brusman, have I misspoke or expectations?
Commissioner Tuma, I appreciate you taking over the meeting here in this regard, but I also am trying to look at the last paragraph. And you said, after receipt of the compliance filing, the commission will schedule the matter for a final route permitting decision subject to the permit conditions at 9.1, requiring the applicant to come back to the commission upon completion of all phases of the full inventories. So I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I'm trying to be clear that in my original motion, the idea was that the surveys would be done, there would be compliance filings indicating that Magellan had talked to all of the entities about what they found in the surveys, and then the commission would make a route decision. And this last sentence, we're all just seeing it in live time right now, and so apologies for interrupting, but I'm not understanding what this would do.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I thought it was clear, so I'll go over it again. We put in a very critical, I thought, permit condition, 9.1, which requires once the full survey is complete, they must come back to us and we must review it and give parties a chance to comment. And so what this is saying is...
But don't they get that after they get the permit?
So the reality is, okay, yeah, that's what it's saying. Maybe it's not artfully said, but that's exactly what it's saying. So it's saying exactly what we did before, that extra step after the full survey is done, because we know that they're probably not going to be able to complete the full survey without access to property, is that even once we make the RA, say we pick RA3, okay, then the full report will be done. After the full report is done, they come back to us a second time. And then parties have a chance to comment on the full report. And that's important because if there is something on the route that requires mitigation, okay, that's going to be the important. Phase 3 is the important one, and we'll never get there until we actually have access to the property. No one's going to allow people to go digging on their property. I'd be surprised if a farmer is going to allow someone to go dig in their field voluntarily unless they know they got to give it up under eminent domain. And so this is to make sure everybody's clear on, we can only do so much the first go around. That's for the selection of the two routes, but we're still going to come back for that next visit, the last one, where we're going to make sure everybody has a chance to look at the full, final, complete analysis. So I'm hoping this is actually enhancing what you did.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I understand and I agree with you last time because I thought that was a rational way to make a decision based on the records. But also I state today, it is not necessarily about the rationality on this. This is about building the trust. Tribal nation wants to see each step of process. Last time we skipped a couple of process and go directly into the final phase. So I think we try to build up that trust by going through this process. That's why rather than we prejudge on this outcome, let the process to reveal the outcome and we can make a decision every step at that time. I know it's a slow process and that we may need 2 or 3 more meetings to do it, but that will bring to the final decision and everybody can see it.
Commissioner Hom, that's exactly what I'm doing.
I understand.
So you should support the modifications
No,
that I put in here because they're meant specifically to do that, to create the trust. I put in the language before selecting a consultant. They must consult.
I understand, but...
All steps along the way, they must consult, okay?
So, for example, removing RA2, I understand. Last time we discussed this one, and some of the members agree with it too, but we cannot hear from all these 15 entity plus additional tribal nation who has an interest in this. That's why...
Well, I'm confused by RA2. RA2, Does someone have the map?
If we go this route, I think we may face similar situation. Rather than we weed out based on our perspective, what tribal members said in all their comments said they do not like any of these routes. That's why we have to leave this whole thing in the process to reveal outcome. I understand we have to make a difficult decision, but rather than we make a decision without the records, we need to see full-blown record to make a decision because it's a difficult decision to make. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but we may need to go a little slow on this.
So you're then we might as well put the alternate route in the preferred route. Okay, that makes no sense. We made a determination, Commissioner Hom, a very good determination, by the way, based on a very solid record that an ALJ, and ALJ Meyer is not, out there to get anybody. He's one of the most respected attorneys that have been in front of us, used to work for Attorney General Ellison, okay, who looked at it and said, here's 4 viable routes. And we said 2 of the routes get too close to this cultural significant asset. The preferred alternative, the preferred route, and RA2. RA2 actually tunnels through some of the granite, okay, the granite that it contains the pipestone. And we said, you know what, there's no indication that there's pipestone there, but out of abundance of caution, let's go 2.5 miles away. And so why would we want to examine RA2 when we already know it has a cultural significant asset in it, the granite? That's what we're trying to avoid. So we're left with really only 2 viable decisions, as ALJ Meyer told us. Okay, if you're going to put cultural significant resources at play in the record, clearly explained in his assessment, clearly explained in the department's assessment, okay, that if you want to avoid, be the furthest away from those, you make a choice between RA1 and RA3. I thought that's what we were here for. I thought that's what we wanted to do. And so why would we even consider RA2?
I think, Commissioner Tuma, let me just back up and try to understand, and then you confirm that this is what you're proposing. You're amending my decision option to say, as much as possible, they're going to do full cultural and archaeological and historical resources inventory for RAO1 and RAO3.
Yes.
And if they can't complete it because they don't have access to a small portion of the route, then after the commission makes the selection of the route, the company would still be required to complete the full survey as would be required under our permit anyway.
As it was required in our permit that we passed, the special condition that they have to come back to us and give people a chance to comment on that full assessment.
And help me understand that from my perspective, and I know you made a decision previously that you still think, that it was justifiable, but it felt to me like in the last order we switched, we didn't allow for the tribes to see the results of the cultural survey and have that work done and completed and in front of them to weigh in on route preference.
All your provisions requiring that are still there.
Yeah, so I'm just talking this through with you. That would still happen under your proposed changes. It's just saying that at the end then, after the commission makes a selection, then the applicant, which they'd have to do anyway, is going to have to complete the rest of the phase of the selected route. And you're trying to say, I'm trying to build in an additional check to say, okay, fine, then after that, the commission, it could just be a compliance thing, right? Maybe. Again, we'll say okay, these were the results of once we did the full phase 2 surveys, then we're done.
Yeah, the full would be phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 additional work that may need to be done if it needs to be. So yes, you're absolutely correct. I'm trying to build off of what we did for protections in the last permit, and also what you're suggesting, more information that you need to make a decision between the routes.
And it's not circumventing any consultation, or I keep saying consultation, but I mean coordination with tribal entities or tribal nations as listed here. They would, under your proposed changes, it's still like incorporating their concerns. And one slight modification I would have that you'd agree to, I'm sure, is on the back page. It says the applicant shall also confer with MNSHPO and the relevant TIPO representatives and MNOSA. And we should add in and MIAC
I'm fine with that, Madam Chair.
regarding the results of the phase 1 of the surveys.
And I apologize, I was trying to be very clear that I'm trying to build off of what you've done here.
No,
and not
I
take
think
anything away from it.
it's just, for everyone watching, it's just like really hard because we can't coordinate when we're on break about what we're trying to work on, so we have to
It would have been much easier
talk
if we
through
could have,
this. So, Commissioner Hom, does that help you be more comfortable with Commissioner Tuma's suggested edits here?
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I understand, and then I think the last time I made a decision based on those rational discussion we had. Once again, I'm pulling back from it. I decide to reconsider my decision and Commission's decision made in October, because we may need to address some of the concern that tribal nations are asking. To me, I understand ALJ provide a good record based on the given record at the time, but now they spoke with the letters after that. That's why we have to address that. Are we going to skip certain process again? We may end up with the same position. That's why I personally prefer including RA2 to see everybody what's in there culturally. I understand there's a limitation with the phase 1. However, we need to see it before we make a decision. I think that's what Commissioner Sullivan and Chair Sivan trying to address last time. It was not, we are not going to make a decision. We are going to make a decision with full-blown record before we make a judgment on that part, because a cultural survey wasn't done at that level.
I can tell you this, I am not ever going to select RA2. Not in my lifetime, ever will I vote for RA2. It's just not going to happen. So why are we even considering it? None of the tribes want it to be considered, okay? They're asked. The applicant has already told us RA2 is not even being considered. Why would we? They could withdraw it right now and it would go away. So why would we even spend time sending people walking along that route when it's not even going to be a consideration for us? That makes no sense to me, Commissioner Hom. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I want the tribes to be involved in every consultation and step along the way as we try to make an assessment between 3 and 1. Okay? That is important to me, and I want that to happen. Why would I want to spend resources and send tribal people down a route where they're going to say, absolutely no way? I mean, that's what they're going to say. It's going to be, it goes through granite, it goes through the granite area. It's when we actually asked them to define the place, they said the place included that granite, and we moved away from the granite and said that was the place of concern. And so now I'm out of that place. I want to make sure these 2 routes that are outside that place are fully analyzed against each other. That's it. I don't know why I would even want to do 2. It makes just I'm perplexed. I apologize for that.
Yeah, I understand your rationale, but I want to make sure that tribal nations and the members to see it, and they speak to us rather than we tell them this is good for you.
I thought they already spoke to us when they told us, don't do RA2. Every one of them in the record that has spoken to us has said, don't do RA2. They told us to do not any of it. Okay, I got that.
No, no,
Okay, but it was very clear to me, RA2 was absolutely in the place. And I asked those questions very carefully at the last hearing about where's the place, what are we talking about? And every one of them said, RA2 is in the place, and I want to stay out of that place.
I think this is like a interesting debate, and if I can try to, well, just to allow cooler heads to prevail a little bit, Commissioner Tuma, I think Commissioner Hom is trying to say, like, he wants to see it done so he can compare, and the tribes can give their input and make comparisons between 3 routes. So I'm indifferent whether we include RA02 or not. Like, I appreciated that when asked, you know, most said, like, we don't want to look at it. And I understand you're saying it's a very, but you also just said, Commissioner Tuma, that there were 4 viable routes, and the ALJ said we could select any of them. So it's not like this is being pulled out of thin air. If you know, like, we're looking for the feedback and the careful analysis done by the entities or done by Magellan in coordination with the entities listed here. None of us are trying to circumvent that. We want the tribes to provide their input before we make a route selection. So in that regard, like, I don't think it's worth getting too tied up about, because we will hear what they have to say, which I think, to your point, is like they're not going to like it.
They're not going to like it.
But I don't know. I don't know what you think, Commissioner Hom.
Madam Chair, go ahead, Commissioner Sullivan.
You know, at one level, for me, I feel like what we've got here is what we've iterated to today, what Commissioner Tuma has suggested revisions. Like, I feel like any one of these routes, if it were to come back after the full cultural survey, archaeological and cultural survey could come back and we could say, it's not acceptable. I'm not going to do it. We could reject it. And from my perspective, I mean, I appreciate what you had to say, Commissioner Hom, but I don't think RA2 would be a viable route. I mean, Commissioner Tuma said that he wouldn't vote for it. I don't think it would be, based on what I understand. I wouldn't want to, you know, put the applicant and the communities, you know, through the process of doing it. But I am also respectful of the point that you make, that I need a full record, and I understand that and appreciate that. But from my perspective, to move this along, I'm comfortable with what Commissioner Tuma has put together here. You know, we can do some more wordsmithing if necessary. We can change some happies to glads. Sorry. But I mean, I do think at the end of the day, you know, if this comes back and it's unacceptable, it's unacceptable. And from my perspective, you know, like that, I mean, I'm looking at this like there's no great option here. We've got, you know, there's no great option here, but this is based on where we're at today, the conversation we've had, the testimony we've heard. You know, I'm fairly comfortable with what Commissioner Tuma has put forward.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would move on our own motion, we adopt the decision modified 3 Tuma suggested revisions with the change to MIAC as you recommended.
Okay, that works from my perspective, but Commissioner Hom, did you want to add in any further compliance notifications or things that would be, anything that you think would help provide updates to the full commission on how the work is going? I think it was you that earlier said that it might be helpful
Yeah,
So-
thank you, Chair Stephen. Emma, do you have the language?
That's acceptable to me, Madam Chair. Looks good. I would add that to my motion.
And Commissioner Tuma incorporates that. Just a question, Commissioner Hum, when it says an estimated completion date, that means of the inventories? Okay.
Yes.
Is there any other discussion on the overall motion? And I think that hasn't already been said, that Commissioner Hum.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Once again, I'm not disagreeing with you on the RA2, but as I stated, I think sometimes we have to let the slow process reveal information to get there. But I think, as Commissioner Sullivan said, I think we have to move on. Then, because of it, I will agree with it and I'll support this motion.
Thanks.
Any other comments on the overall motion here? Or staff, we're all good on the motion? All in favor of Commissioner Tuma's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails 4-0. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation in this item and your continued work. Before we take up item 2, we'll take a 5-minute break. Commission stands in recess.
Sorry, I wasn't clear.
How are you?
She went out that way.
Mary, the mics are off, right?
DC Recon.
The commission will come back from its recess and take up agenda item number 2. Mr. Eknes, will you please introduce item number 2?
Thank you. Yes. Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item number 2 is docket CN-22-607 and TL-22-611 involving Minnesota Power and its application for a certificate of need and route permit for a high voltage transmission line for the HVDC modernization project in Hermantown in St. Louis County. Question for the Commission: should the Commission reconsider its October 25, 2024 order granting that certificate of need and route permit? Representatives of the applicant, the large power interveners, the American Transmission Company, and the Department of Commerce, both the Division of Energy Resources and the Energy Environmental Review and Analysis units are available should the Commission have any questions.
It's another reconsideration petition. Are there any questions from commissioners? Or discussion? Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I'll move decision option 1 to deny the request for reconsideration. I've reviewed the petition, briefing papers. There's no new issues that are raised. I don't think there was no error in the decision or in the order, so I will move to deny the request.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. I'll just note that although there were some issues related that were raised around costs, and point out that those will come up in our cost recovery proceeding that will follow. So some of these issues will still be discussed later too. But I support your motion. Commissioner Tuma.
I support the motion too. I just wanted to be clear too that in supporting the motion, it doesn't mean I think the caps may not be appropriate at some point down the road, and I'm pretty sure that's where Commissioner Sullivan is at, knowing his past opinions on that. But I just wanted to make it very clear so that the person who applied for the recon understands that we're still considering those things. And frankly, the fact that they're there watching over it makes me know that I'm going to get a pretty robust record when we get to the point where we may actually put caps on if we feel that's necessary. So I'm very comfortable with the motion. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of Commissioner Sullivan's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the motion prevails. Thank you. Item number 3, Mr. Willett. Welcome, and please introduce it when you're ready.
Yes. Hello, Chair, Commissioners. Item number 3 is Otter Tail Power Company, docket number E-013/M-24-186 in the matter of Otter Tail Power Company's petition for approval of annual update to its implement electric utility infrastructure cost recovery rider rate schedule 13.11. Should the issue in front of the Commission, should the Commission approve Otter Tail's proposal to increase rates in the company's electric utility infrastructure cost rider take effect on the first day following approval? And there has been new filings. On 12/31, Otter Tail filed decision option 6, and then they refiled it today with trade secret. And then in that in both filings, they recommended decision options 1, 2, 3, and 6, and their new 6. The department also filed a letter in support of the new decision option 6, 1, 2, and 3. And staff's available for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Willett. It looks like the Otter Tail and the department are both available online for questions. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I don't know who from Otter Tail will be answering the question, so I'll just address it to everybody. But regarding the trade secret information that was filed initially as not trade secret, what would Otter Tail recommend that we don't normally approve soft caps, but not publicly make it always comes with a number that is publicly available. So what would Otter Tail recommend that we do, or can you just give us a number that does not implicate the program in a way that is, has competitive problems or whatever?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Sullivan, if you please, my name is Lauren Donofrio, and I am in-house counsel for Otter Tail Power. What could be done would be very similar to what is in decision decision options 4 and 5, where instead of listing the price, we list the number of units, because where that variability is in the number of units and not in the cost, if that would be helpful.
Okay, so would we just do decision option 4 then? That has the number of units there, or?
Sure. No, what I would propose then in that case would be revising option 6 to replace the dollars with the 2 different numbers of units, meaning either the 26,000 or the 40,000 instead of the dollar amount, and then that would not need to be trade secret.
Okay, so let me get that right here. So decision option 6, okay, let's just do this on the fly. So then let's, if we start from decision option, let's start with decision option 4, if that's okay. And then how would you modify that so it's consistent with your agreement?
I apologize. I'm trying to pull that up quickly.
That's under cost
Nancy
cap.
Campbell for the department. This is Nancy Campbell for the department. Could I step in and maybe offer an easier solution?
Yeah. Is that okay? Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Is that okay? Could we just reference Otter Tail's revised letter that they filed on October 7th? So we're still doing decision option 6 that's proposed, but we would just, instead of mentioning the dollar amounts, the 2 cap numbers that are trade secret, couldn't we just reference Otter Tail's letter?
That works.
And then you don't have to mention it. Yeah, why don't we do that? I think if Otter Tail's okay with that.
That's a great.
As long as our order writer is comfortable with that, that will work. And then Ms. Campbell, or for Otter Tail, this says that it will become effective the month after we make a decision. Does that really mean the month after we make the order comes out? Is that your understanding, Ms. Donofrio?
Yes, that is my understanding, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan, do you have a motion, or are there other questions from commissioners?
So then can I have 1 minute so I can confer with staff on what my decision option 6 will be?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. I'll be right back.
The commission stands in recess. Okay, the commission comes back from a recess, and Commissioner Sullivan?
All right, thank you, Chair Sieben. So I do have a decision option, and that decision option, so I'll just put my motion forward, and then I will move decision option 1, 2, 3, and then a new decision option 6, which staff has sent to our order writer. And are you going to flash it up onto the screen, Ms. Kaler? Thank you. What we've done with this decision option is we've taken the previous decision option that had the trade secret information in it and modified it per the company's recommendation and what staff recommended would work. So,
And were you referencing the trade secret letter somewhere?
this does reference the
Mr. Willett, didn't we need to reference the trade secret letter? Or no?
I don't.
Ms. Gretz, I think she wrote it up.
Commissioner Sullivan, I think if you want to include the reference to the trade secret letter, you could insert after the word soft cost cap as filed.
As filed.
In the company's trade secret letter. And then pick up the existing text with that reflects the company's ability.
All right. Thank you.
I wasn't trying to be argumentative, I just was, I thought.
No.
Ms. Campbell, does that work from your perspective?
Yes. Let me say, Nancy Campbell from the department, and with me is Ashley Uppus from the department as well, the analyst. And yes, I think that would be helpful so that it's clear about what the soft caps are with the various options. So if you reference Otter Tail's now October 7th letter, I think that would be very helpful for the future EUIC rider proceedings.
And Ms. Donofrino, you're okay, I see you nodding, so you're okay with that new language?
Madam Chair, I thought we were referencing the
January 7th.
January 7th, 2025.
2025 letter. Yep.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan has his decision option 6 here on the screen, and the other ones he said.
Our decision options 1, 2, and 3.
Any other discussion, commissioners? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your participation. The agenda meeting is adjourned for the day. Take care.